recognize that this is these are new times and somewhat unusual circumstances. So the technology may not always work for us. I want you to remember that we always do have a backup plan here at the USG. So we are recording this.
Where did you get that phone, Jonathan?
This is the backup plan. It comes in the emergency momentum packs. Every campus should have gotten a dial-up rotary dial phone. Maybe you got the Princess models. Don't tell anybody if you got the Princess models, because everyone wanted those. Many of you will have gotten the indestructible bomb-proof phones from the 1940s. So I am really glad to be here. Again, I'm going to say it's been a long time since we have been together as a learning sports community. And again, if you're new as you come in, that would be great. I can see who's actually violating the community code here, so but I won't call you out. But it's great to have you all together. I recognize this is not the setting that at least that I would like to, but it does give us the advantage of getting together without having to get into our cars and driving to another campus. I am ever hopeful that we'll be back to that setting soon. But for today, I just want to we want to come back and reset to where we have been. So we're going to sort of do a little bit of what we would do during the academies that we did not get to have in the spring. And again, I apologize to you all, particularly the folks at Albany State and Georgia Highlands who had put themselves out to have to set them up for us. And again, we'll hope to get together soon. But we're going to do some of the things that we would normally do at the academy, and then we're going to also talk about how we'll fill out some of the sort of needs that we've sort of assessed coming into this spring. So first off, today we're going to have a brief update on where we are at CoReq the Scale. One of the things that we were really excited about, and some of you have seen this if you were at the GOS meeting or the GABE meeting in February, but many of you will not know really what the data looks like with CoReq at scale. We had a year's worth of work where we had every student in, and it was pretty. It's a pretty exciting times, and I'm glad to have Barbara Brown here to go through all of that. The bulk of the conversation today is going to be you, and so we're going to have a town hall discussion. This is that opportunity where you get to share your what's working, what's not working, where you're planning to go, where you're hoping to go but need more support. I want to talk just a very bit at the end about where we're going ahead. So I'm going to make a very quick transition to Barbara Brown. This is the highest risk element of the day, second highest risk element of the day, where we actually try and hand off the baton. I'm going to stop sharing. It means you'll be having a blank screen or possibly just my video, which will be a solid disappointment. And then Barbara is going to come back in and give us an update on how we've done, how we did at our first year of CoReq. I thought I stopped sharing.
I think we're getting there.
Okay, perfect. It just went back to me. And now I'm seeing you.
Okay.
4 dots.
Now I don't.
All right, folks.
Are you seeing anything?
It flicked up for a second, Barbara. I was actually going to get very excited.
An error occurred during the screen presentation. Let's try again.
All right, if you can't, I've got it, and I will run this for you. That's true. Well, look at us.
Got it now?
We got it now, Barbara.
Okay. So Jonathan asked me to do this as a warm-up act for him so that there'll be a sober presentation before his usual antics. I'm calling this Wow, Look at Us, because as we go through, you'll see that you all should be saying, wow, look at us, because we've done really well over the past year. And as you guys all know, the big challenge between fall 2017 and fall 2018, and I'll just say I don't have fall 2019 data yet, but the big challenge between fall 2017 and fall 2018 was that we went to an entirely co-requisite model, which, as you all know, meant that the students that previously would have been in Foundations Learning Support were placed in co-requisite learning support, and that was kind of a scary thing to do. And some of you have already seen, the fact is we've done really, really well. This is showing at different levels of preparation. That's what the x-axis is. How students did in passing English 1101. So, and the blue line here is traditional learning support. The green line is Foundations from 2015 to 2017. The red line is the students that were placed in co-requisite 2015 to 2017. And the purple line is full implementation of co-requisite only in fall 2018. And you can see that even though between 2017 and 2018 we folded in all of those students that previously would have been in Foundations, the success rate in English 1101 is virtually untouched, and we're pretty excited about that. We see a very similar picture in math, again, at pretty much all levels, maybe one exception right here. The students in full co-requisite are doing as well as the students who were in co-requisite when we also had Foundations. Again, something that you all should be really, really proud of. Of course, we're also concerned about equity. Yeah, we're doing well. Is everybody doing well? So this slide shows the equity profile for English with co-requisite implementation, and the lower lines are traditional developmental education and Foundations. And what you can see here, is that pretty much all groups are doing really, really well. That's for English. For math, we've got a similar picture. Again, all groups are doing really, really well. We're excited about that. Now, there is some institutional variation, and my point isn't to call out or shame any institutions, but just to say, when we look at the success rates, we can see that there's a lot of variation between institutions. It would be nice to know what factors help students to succeed. What is the difference between the green and the blue lines? And I can't tell you that for sure, but I'll talk about what we've looked at and what seems to make a difference. So here are the things we thought might make a difference. ACT and SAT scores, yeah, they make a difference, but we can't control them. Same with high school grade point average. Yeah, it makes a difference, but we have no control over that. The next 5 things are things we do have some control over. So that's what we're going to look at. The credit hours in the co-requisite support course. The model for the collegiate course, is it cohort or commingled? And if you're not sure what that is, I will explain it. Same versus different instructors for the co-requisite and collegiate sections. Alignment between the 2 sections. And one that you guys asked to have added in, class sizes. Okay, credit hours. Credit hours, without a doubt, make a difference. This graph is showing pass rates in English 1101 for 1 credit hour, English 99, 2 credit hour, and 3 credit hour. And 2 right now looks a little bit better than 3, I'm not sure, but for sure 1 credit hour is not as good as 2 or 3. We're recommending that these courses not be offered for 1 credit hour based on these findings. For math, we have a similar picture. There's a little bit of a complication in math. We had one institution that offered courses at both 1 and 2 credit hours, and another one that offered 2 institutions that offered courses at 2 to 3 credit hours. And what you can see is that 1 or 1 to 2 are clearly not as good. The 1 to 2 is probably not as good because of the 1 being included in the data. I want to point out that the 2 to 3 is, although it only represents 2 institutions, is really much higher success rate than the rest. And that's something that I think we should pay attention to, because presumably what these 2 institutions have done is put their less prepared students in a 3 credit hour co-requisite, and their more prepared students in a 2 credit hour co-requisite. And what you notice is that the performance of this group is better than either the pure 2 credit hour or the pure 3 credit hour. And it may be because essentially they have allowed for differentiated instruction by putting students in 2 or 3 credit hour courses. So that would be something to keep at the back of your mind. But once again, in terms of credit hour recommendations, we can say that we do not recommend offering co-requisite math courses at 1 credit hour. We also looked at whether it's better to have a cohort or a commingled model. Cohort model means that all of the students in the English 101 section are also in co-requisite remediation, learning support. And commingled means that some of the students in the English 101 section are in co-requisite and the others are not. And in this case, it looks like the cohort model works a little bit better. I think there's a statistically significant difference here. My hesitation about fully endorsing the cohort model is that it also means that you would have the same class sizes in the co-requisite and the collegiate sections, which might not be sustainable financially, because we need, as you'll see, we need smaller class sizes in the co-requisite sections. So that's English. This is math. I'm not even sure that these differences are really significant, but the commingled model in the collegiate math course worked better. So certainly if you're doing it, you should feel you're doing the right thing. We also looked at same versus different instructor, and I'll just point out that most institutions are using the same instructor for the collegiate and the co-requisite courses wherever they can. In English, it does seem to make a significant difference in the pass rates. Students passed English 101 at higher rates if they had the same instructor for both. In math, it looks like the opposite is true, although the difference isn't as big. But we can recommend for English, and this we thought that this might be true because Tennessee had found something similar, that in English, if at all possible, students should have the same instructor for co-requisite and collegiate courses. The other thing we wanted to look at was the alignment model. The possibilities are that alignment can be 1-to-1, which means all the co-requisite students are all in the same collegiate section. 2-to-1 means the co-requisite students can come from 2 collegiate sections. More than 2-to-1 means the co-requisite students can come from more than 2 collegiate sections. But they're all funneled. There's some deliberate alignment in all of those models. And the yellow or gold bars are where students with co-requisite requirements can sign up for any co-requisite section. So that I'm calling that the least aligned model. And the data on success rates shows very clearly that in both math and English, the less students in the less aligned co-requisite sections have lower pass rates in collegiate English and collegiate math. Now, you ask to know about class size. Does it make a difference? So we have limited data on class size. All we know is what you told us in fall 2018 was your maximum class size, but we took that. and compared that to success rates in English and then also in math. Now, when I look at this, I first thought, oh, scrambled eggs, there's really nothing. But if you squint, there's kind of a relationship that is the larger the class size, the lower the pass rates. It's not a great relationship. The correlation coefficient is 0.29, which is marginally significant. In the world of correlation coefficients, it's respectable, but weak. But it does suggest that there is a relationship between class size and success rates, and that for English, smaller class sizes in English 099 lead to higher pass rates in English 101. And if I had to pick a dividing point, I would pick 20 and recommend that these classes be 20 or fewer in English 99. Now, math had much more spread. In terms of class size, it ranged from, looks like 8 to 35. And again, when I looked at this, I saw nothing. When I did the correlation coefficient, it was 0.04, which is very close to 0, which would suggest that there's absolutely no relationship between class size and success in math. But then I looked at this one point up here. This happens to be Georgia Tech with about a 97% pass rate. And I said, what if I eliminated that and recalculated the correlation coefficient? And now it's minus 0.30, which is just about the same as we saw for English. So based on that, I would have to say that I would again recommend restricting class sizes for co-requisite sections in math. And where the dividing line should be is hard to say, but I'm guessing at about 25. So if I had to recommend, I'd recommend that co-requisite classes in math be 25 or less. What I have, but I want you to just kind of mentally incorporate. We actually have, with the move to fully co-requisite learning support, we have more students passing entry-level English and math courses than ever before. We've seen, as we saw before, that students at all levels of preparation can be successful in the entry-level collegiate courses, which is good, again, good to know. And in terms of what this means for our students, I think of the completion of the entry-level courses as a leading indicator for successful degree completion. You know, it's going to be 2 to 6 years before we know whether those students will actually get degrees, depending on associate or bachelor's. But they're not going to get degrees if they don't get through those entry-level courses. So the fact that we've got more students passing entry-level courses is a good indicator. And we have clear data that says that, in general, students who complete basic math and English requirements in the first year are much more likely to complete degrees. So my big conclusion is y'all should be patting yourselves on the back for a job well done under difficult circumstances. And I know it's been hard to maintain faith particularly while integrating those foundation students into co-requisite, but more students are passing than ever before, and that's what we wanted. And that is the end of my presentation. Now I have to figure out how to stop presenting. Okay, I'm done presenting. So Jonathan, you can take it back.
There's a part of me, Barbara, that just wanted, there's a part of me that just wanted to leave this and say, well, Barbara, actually, I'm just going to leave it for you for now. Thank you, Barbara, for that. I was actually, so I've seen this. This is the wrong one. I've seen this slideshow and a couple of times, I guess. And I actually am always really taken aback at the fact that when we went into full scale, our expectation, our anticipation was that by placing all of our students into co-requisite learning support, we were actually going to see a cratering of our success, and we were actually sort of preparing for how we would communicate with you, the audience, or the learning support community rather. How would you communicate that it's still okay? And so the fact that y'all did such a good job at what you did means that you totally ruined our message. That instead of saying it's okay, we're actually saying it was great, that we actually did better. So one of the things that I'd note from this, and we've touched on a tremendous amount of structural aspects of learning support so far. We tackled placement, we tackled the approach, we've discussed now credit hours and commingle and the instructor model and the class model. And we've gotten to kind of channel Houston Davis, we've gotten a lot of juice out of that squeeze, and there's still some left to be done. As Barbara noted, there's a great deal because of how the system has rolled out co-requisite learning support. There's a fair amount of variability in the system as a system that gives us a little bit of a natural experiment. But a lot of what we see, what we anticipate in terms of some of the where we go next has to do with the types of practices and pedagogies that are embedded within the course. And this we recognize is both harder to track, it's harder to change, and it's much more complex. So we aren't really sure what that looks like, and that's kind of where we see the co-requisite work going in this next phase. We want to talk about sort of instructional practices. We want to talk about what academic mindset interventions look like, because one of the things we've heard a great deal about is academic mindset really plays a big role for students who come in with senses that they are not as well prepared as their peers for college level work. What sort of outside supports and structures that are in place. So with that, we're going to open this up. We've got about 40 minutes left, and I'm hoping that the over 100 people who are on here, we can, that gives us all about 20 seconds to say one thing. But what I'm going to ask you to do is we can do it two ways. You can unmute if you want, just start to blurt out, and blurting is fine. But if we all blurt at once, it's going to be a bit much. But if you have something you want to raise, there's a chat box in Skype. If you're not familiar with the Skype interface, on the right-hand side, there's a little nonsensical icon. It's the second one from the right, and it's a chat. You can type in that I'd like to speak, or you can just say I'm speaking and unmute yourself and go. If you don't know how to unmute yourself, down at the bottom you've got a little microphone icon. If you're on a desktop, or even I believe on a device, and if you just turn it from black to blue, you'll be unmuted and talking. I'd like you if you'd let us know who you are, where you're from. I don't believe we have anybody on the phone, but we've got but we can open up them if there's anybody who dials in, we can open them up for a little bit. If you have a comment, please feel free to circle back to a previous discussion. Some opening salvos that I'd love to ask anyone to sort of respond to is what's worked for you in your face-to-face classes, so before we went to virtual. I'd encourage you also to sort of think about what's worked in the shift to virtual support. So what has worked for you as you've moved over to online? What are you planning or hoping to try out this summer or in the fall? Sort of what things are you really hoping to try that are new? And what challenges do you need help on from the learning support community? So this is your opportunity. You are free to unmute, or you can put it in the chat box. But we really do want to I'd like to have an open discussion. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm actually going to mute myself, which is painful.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes. Hey, this is Donna Brulette from Perimeter College at Georgia State. I just had a quick question about the slide that was the credit hour recommendation for math. Is there a possible way to get that data broken down by 997 and 999 rather than just the 1 hour and 2 hour?
I'm not sure. The data sets are really big, and I don't think initially that we did break them down that way, but I'll look at it.
Okay.
See if we can do it. And somebody else asked about institutional type. I can break it down by institutional type, but as soon as you start to do that, the number of institutions you have for comparisons gets smaller. But I'll see if I can do both of those things. And
Yeah, we have our 11 CoReq at 2 hours, but the 1001 at 1, and I'd just like to see if it's as bad as that seems.
Again, there's a lot of institutional variation, and we're just doing the best we can with the data that we have, but I'll see what I can make available to you.
And I see someone on the chat has asked if anyone has developed an online version of the CoReq. We've been offering both online versions the whole year of 997 and 999 and plan to do 996 in the fall.
What's your experience been with that, with the online? How's it gone?
I think pretty well. Andrea Hendricks, our online associate chair, is also on the call. I don't know if she'd like to speak to that, but I don't think the pass rates have been much different from the face-to-face classes.
I'm not sure if you're on mute. So can I ask a question while she's getting back on? Is with the online courses, are these students who are in online sections of the collegiate course, or are these students who are in in-person sections?
They're online. They have to have the same instructor. If they're online for the collegiate, they're online for the CoReq. Same instructor, same class.
Did you say you were from Perimeter?
Yes.
Okay, because that was my big question. Going to online now wasn't as big a deal because we know our students. But if come fall we're still online, I'm clueless as to how I want to proceed with a 3-credit version. So I'd love to see what you did.
So when you say it was easy because you knew your students, you're concerned because you won't have an opportunity to build community within that course before you go to online.
Right. Yeah, it's much easier when the students already know you, and in order to have them trust you online. So
I will sort of use that as an opportunity for a plug for next week on Wednesday. We're going to be talking to Sonia Ford from Midlands Community College in Texas about that very subject, about building community in an online course. So you'll get an invitation at the end after today's event, but that is a big concern. It is something that I think we'll be investigating in a full hour next week.
Is it possible for us to get that recorded? Because I know I'm teaching at that time.
Yes, anything we're doing will be recorded.
Thank you.
So, Andrea, I think you were trying to get on. Did you manage to get unmuted? Yes.
Andrea says she's having audio issues.
Okay. Sorry.
She's going to leave and return. And Kokila Ravi asked, would it be possible for the system to assist with the process of converting the CoReq course to an online version? And I don't really see us having the capacity to do that. Do you agree, Jonathan?
Yeah, I also think that it's such a localized question.
Yeah.
That we would be in the way.
Yep.
If there is, if Georgia State, if you have resources to share, we'd love to drag them. Yeah, we're a repository of resources I think we can easily collect.
Yeah.
And we can post, and I actually think that would be an easy way to do it. I've been I've been noodling with the best model for that, and we can certainly create an online repository in a number of settings. If there are resources that you think would be useful to the community, if you'll send them to my email address, I will create the repository and then make it available through the Learning Support Community listserv.
Okay.
So Sharon Duhart at Learning Metro is asking about results of the vendor tutor.com, helping with online support in math and English CoReq. Anyone had any luck? Any work with them?
Can you repeat the question?
So Sharon Duhart asked, does anyone have good results of the vendor tutor.com, helping with online support in math and English CoReq? Sharon, it sounds like no.
This is Allison from Georgia Southern. I will share for us in tutoring what we're acknowledging with our learning support students is that a big part of them even feeling comfortable utilizing tutoring is if they can build a connection with their tutor and feel like it's a safe environment to admit that they're really struggling. So that is why we avoided resources like tutor.com and started doing virtual tutoring ourselves. And Georgia Southern is embedding one of our tutors into our learning support course for summer so that tutor can build a relationship with those students specifically. So that's why we avoided resources like that for right now.
Thank you. So if there are institutions using peer tutors embedded in classes remotely other than Georgia Southern, so what I'll do today is I'll collect a note and just sort of place these into a place where we can identify them and create community around that. Mark, do you want to take Rosie Petty's question about placement?
Yeah, I'm realizing that some of you may not have seen the memos that go out because they tend to go to VPAAs. This requires a little bit of background. Without ACT and SAT, some institutions, and because they're not being given in the near future, some institutions would actually not be able to admit students at all if we didn't find a workaround for essentially going test-free. So what we did at the system office is look at the data we had and found grade point averages, high school grade point averages, where we could admit students that would keep approximately the numbers of students that we've been admitting all along. So test-free admissions wouldn't really change the profile very much. But this meant we were lowering the high school grade point averages for admission. And initially we were keeping the high school grade point averages that we had to exempt learning support. And people pointed out that we had a huge gap there and that a very large number of students would fall into it and be placed in co-requisite learning support that wouldn't normally. So we adjusted the high school grade point averages down to make the gap smaller. And people are still worried that too many students may fall into the gap and place into co-requisite learning support. The other way out of co-requisite learning support has been to take an AccuPlacer placement test. And for a while, those were available, but they also have become a victim of COVID-19. We're just starting to get back to the point where we have some ways that we can admit those. So if you have students that are falling into the gap and placing into co-requisite learning support, that would like to not be in there or that you think shouldn't be in there, there either is already or will be a way for you to admit AccuPlacer tests virtually.
Barbara, this is Curtis.
Mhm.
When you say you adjusted the high school GPAs down, is that for placement or for admission?
Both,
For
but they're
both.
separate. So the first thing we did was adjusted the GPAs down for admission, but then that left a huge distance between the admission GPA and the exemption from learning support GPA. So we subsequently adjusted that down. These are temporary measures applicable only to summer and fall admissions, but they should address the numbers. Basically, we adjusted them to try to keep the number and proportion of students placing into co-requisite support about where it has been.
Thank you.
This is Eric at Middle Georgia. This is Eric at Middle Georgia State. With the change in the guidelines, the high school GPA guidelines, we're having to go back and reevaluate our new admits that had already come in with the previous guidelines. And part of it is because we didn't want two standards. And I'm just wondering what other schools are doing now that we do not have the test scores. Because as you know, a fairly large number of the exemption criteria is based on test scores.
So, Eric, I know at least one other institution is doing the same reevaluation of their for that very reason. I don't want to call anybody out.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what other schools are doing, because we're afraid that we'd have students that came in later after the change saying that now I'm exempt, and those that are in learning support from the previous criteria are saying, why are we in learning support? When all the basically the only difference now is the high school GPA. Any other school? I'm just wondering what other schools are doing, because many of you, by the time the change came around, admissions have already started filling your fall class. Or is nobody concerned about that?
I see your chat in the chat. What school are you from, Jennifer? All you have is the first name in my window. It's very friendly. What, Eric, maybe what we can do is post that to the LS community listserv too and see.
Yeah, we actually changed our algorithm and banner to catch to reevaluate everybody and using the new criteria. I know it's temporary, so we'll have to juggle that when it goes back to normal.
We also did the same thing at Southern. We went into Banner as well and changed our rules for summer and fall, and went ahead and made sure spring reverts itself back to normal until we hear otherwise. But just like Jennifer kind of mentioned, because we had already definitely processed a lot of students on the other criteria, so we ran a report on the back end to show us people to audit, and then reevaluated if they were now exempt and notified them of such.
What was the scope of that, Allison?
I mean, it's changing every day. I feel like every report I look at looks a little different. For us, since that's not our primary population, ours is more non-trad coming in, but without high school GPAs. But I think I audited around, majorly our presidential exception admits, and so it was around 120 for us at Southern. So it wasn't bad, and we just did a quick look at their GPA, and that told us quickly if they were now exempt.
So there's two questions that have come up related in the chat box about students taking seriously the learning support course, that students are failing the learning support based on attendance and passing the gateway. And sort of this is a question that's come up again. It is the perennial conversation. It's actually the pivot conversation, I think, in a lot of ways about what we do in that class. But are there thoughts about ways in which the learning support course can engage in students in a, are there thoughts that the community has about engaging them in such a way that attendance isn't as much of an issue? In other words, ways to make it seem like it is the benefit that it is.
Yeah. I mean, this is Barbara. I've heard presentations from some of the institutions that suggest that when the alignment is clear and the students are clear on what they're doing in the two courses being related, that helps. So again, some people like to present in the co-requisite section just before they're going to do it in the collegiate section, so students feel like they have an advantage. There are lots of different models, but I think it's really important that students feel that the co-requisite section is relevant to what they're doing. The other thing, and I hate to be, this is more crass, the students do know that only their passing grade in the collegiate course counts toward exiting learning support, but they do need to, if they fail the learning support, you need to fail them in the learning support nonetheless. That influences, I think it influences their financial aid calculation and their percentage of pass rate. And frankly, getting an F in a learning support course doesn't look good on your transcript, even if it doesn't contribute to your grade point average. And I think that the students need to be very clear on that. I'm worried that they think that because it doesn't count in their grade point average, that they think it's invisible. It's not.
I do think it's interesting. There's both Georgia Gwinnett and Jenny, I don't know where you're from, are looking at going back-to-back classes that are back-to-back so that they are essentially one continuous thing. And I think that's a structural. Oh, hey GGC. It's a continuous. It sort of does get back at that idea that there's a structural solution sometimes to what can be a delivery model concern. So, Deepa, you asked an interesting question about whether students who do not exit learning support should be reevaluated for placement. I mean, there's a big part of me that would want to say no, but I think it's fair to say they should. I mean, part of the problem is that if they have not exited learning support, they will be not exiting learning support because they haven't passed the gateway course, which would indicate that they continue to need support in that gateway course. And it would not probably benefit them to be exempted based on criteria if the most salient criteria for their exit or for their exemption from learning support is their success in the course. So I would discourage a reevaluation of continuing students based on that, if only because what the evidence we have on them is that they need support to succeed in the course, or, I mean, as we know, there may be something else going on that they need intervention on.
John, this is Eric, and in regard to that point that you just made, we all know that the change in the high school GPA is temporary, right? But now we have a group of students that are coming in that are not learning support. What if they actually show, I don't know what the data is going to show, but if they're doing well, maybe that is the right GPA for exemption. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, and again, I'm not. We've long said that what we, part of the reason why we haven't wanted to budge too much on GPA and exemption is so many other things have been fluid with respect to testing. We've had like what 5 AccuPlacer scores in the last 8 years. We've got SAT changed. This is a really interesting natural experiment that we could not have otherwise created. We wouldn't have, and so we will certainly take advantage of this. What I don't think we want to do is get into a situation where so the other challenge of this is like what the validity of the high school GPA will mean coming out of this year. Depending upon what happens in the high schools, the GPA in that entire like final term of high school may just be very different. But I think certainly this is a very interesting, uncontrolled experiment that we can use to add to the data to say what is the appropriate point. I mean, part of our big challenge with any sort of placement model is you really it's all proxies for something we can't quite put our finger on.
When we know that, this is Barbara again, we know that when we first set the GPAs for exempting learning support, the original ones, we set them a little on the high side because there were so many other ways that students could get out of learning support. And we were really afraid of things like grade inflation in high school. So we do feel comfortable going to the lower GPAs, and I think we're going to have to look at how those students do to know whether this is something that we would want to continue.
So Chris, at Middle Georgia, you're using Alex PPL?
Yeah, there's no permission to do that. Sorry. You can use it for non-learning support placement.
And Allison is Georgia Southern is looking at opt-in. Is there advising around that, Allison?
Meaning academic advisement? What are you meaning?
Academic advising. So I mean, students opting into a support course is probably a difficult conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering.
Typically it's like a one-person show for that part of our department. So I typically work with the opt-in requests that come in, and so does our team. But for this scenario, it'll probably be more me, and I'll connect with the advisors and talk through it. We already had some students that are coming in that are already expressing that they know, for the lack of better terms, I'm horrific at math, that are wanting that opt-in experience. So we're going to just try to push it out as something that they can consider if they want, since financial aid has agreed if I can prove that they would have potentially needed it historically, that they would cover the cost, since we're not set up as auditing in our system for opt-in.
That seems like a good idea.
Yeah. We'll see. We're going to try it.
Well, I hadn't thought about it, but it may mess up financial aid for students that voluntarily take it. So like your approach.
Yeah.
Of creating a conditional requirement, essentially. So Sharon Duhart from Atlanta Metro has an interesting question here about purchasing textbooks or textbook codes. How many of y'all are moving towards an OER for courses that are going to be online? Okay. Dan, to get to your question about data, I don't know that we've pulled that data. It's certainly data we can look at. Barbara, have we looked at multiple offenders?
I looked at some students that just turned up in the data set. I don't think we've looked at it systematically. It is something we could.
Something that appears data more often is students who take one course and then shift to another course. So when we pull the gateway data courses, one of the things we see is a lot of times students have who have learning support requirements appear in 2 different courses, but only and 2 different learning supports. So it's clear that they're shifting around from courses as much as they are shifting within course, which is, again, interesting behavior. I don't know that the volume is enough to draw a conclusion from.
The question I had more specifically was the likelihood of the student potentially passing or succeeding in that gateway course if they had to retake it again if they weren't successful the first time through, just to see is there value with that continued dedication. Are there other interventions, things like that?
I can tell you anecdotally from the data that I looked at that there certainly are students that fail the course the first time and then pass it. I couldn't tell you because I just looked at some individual data. I couldn't tell you percentage-wise. That's something that we need to look at.
Right, and that's it opens up a really interesting question, Dan, too, about what should be different for a student who did not succeed the first time, if anything. Because the nice thing about it is theoretically you have a whole semester's worth of information about how that student has operated within the course itself to now act on. And sometimes that's available to you and sometimes it's not. But the idea being that if the student has given us information we can actually act on it, it actually becomes a really powerful tool to leverage their success because they're clearly coming back for more. So there's a degree to which they have motivation, but they may have other needs that we just aren't addressing. That's a very good question. And again, Sharon's asking for it, and I think it'd be great if there are resources that are really useful, OERs, particularly to support learning support students. And I'm gonna use this as a segue to something else I wanted to bring up. Shoot them to me, and I will post them in whatever format this repository of resources takes. I also want to come back to this. This is more for the math side. But I guess a year when we met last year, we talked with Wisconsin about the opportunity to use an online math MOOC that they have developed, and I will solicit in a follow-up email anybody who is interested in just reviewing that course. I believe we are still available. We still have it available to us to go and look at it and evaluate it. And they have made the offer. At least they made the offer a year ago before perhaps budget constraints would have caused us otherwise, to let us actually have the material in the course to adopt and adapt as we would want. And I really would love, this again is not a substitute for a learning support course so much as a get ready. They use it as a crash course for students coming into their learning support programs either over the summer or in their first term, so that they're ready for a learning support course in their second term. I would invite anybody to look at those resources too. It's a free online resource for students in Wisconsin, and if we wanted to develop that internally for USG, the materials are sort of set up that way. Other questions that are arising. We're getting some chatter about the online text. Are there other things that y'all would want to raise? Let's see here if we have.
This is Jeff Clement from Gordon State College.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about the MOOC, just logistics. So students would take that course before they take the compost or AccuPlacer?
They certainly could. So, it depends on your timing. Jeff, the challenge would be for a lot of our students who are late enrollees, they wouldn't have much of a chance to, right?
Right.
But for those students for whom it would be available, it's just an added resource. And it's actually, even if they have taken the compass and AccuPlacer and they're placed in the learning support, this is a resource. It is essentially a basic skills math course to prepare students with the essential elements going in towards, and it is driven a little bit more heavily towards college algebra than other maths. But the idea being that for students who have significantly identified deficiencies in their preparation or gaps in their preparation, this is a way for them to rapidly sort through those. I mean, somewhat in the same way that Alex would operate in an online course where it would send you back to look at the foundational material without the sophistication of it. But it gives students who either have placed into learning support or who have been identified otherwise as maybe wanting to do this. It could actually be done all the way into, they in Wisconsin apply it in high schools for students who want to go to college but are not looking ready for college level math, to get them ready. But it can be used because it's a MOOC and because it's structured in a way that it opens in multiple sessions. We could deploy it if we wanted to in ways that would be most appropriate for the system, either as a summer review or a summer preview, even a fall, if you have students who are going to be deferring their math until the spring, as a fall preview course. It's not a full term, it doesn't carry credit, and it doesn't carry costs for the student, which are the three big advantages. But it also, because it doesn't really connect to the math course, it's not necessarily something that you would be shaping in terms of like specific to a course. So I'm not selling it as a cure-all or even as a panacea for less prepared students. But as we look at resources to make sure that we're making things available and we're supporting students as we want, I want to make sure that we at least keep it on the table as an opportunity.
We talked about it a lot, partly as an option for students who are really, really underprepared in math. Non-traditional students that say, well, I haven't done any math since 8th grade. And they know they're going to be in over their head. You might want to defer their math enrollment in learning support and the collegiate math to spring and encourage them to take the MOOC in the fall. You know, efforts that we've made as a system in the past to get students to do MOOC-like preparation. I'm thinking of Pearson, where when students took tests and they didn't exempt learning support, we gave them a voucher and they could go online and do prep. And basically, very few of them took advantage of it. I mean, they're all convinced that they're going to exempt. And if not the first time, they're going to exempt the second time. So it'd be great if they would do it over the summer. But I just don't have much faith in our ability to get them to do it. I think we should make it available for the few students that want to do it. And they could do it before or after taking a placement test. We do allow retesting, so a student who tested really low at the beginning of the summer could work on the MOOC over the summer and then retest.
All right, so being mindful of time, how can we do placement based on high school GPA, Rosie Petty's?
We have a higher high school GPA to place in math 999 than 998. It's, you know, I'll admit it's not a perfect system. This is, you know, this is meatball surgery that we're doing essentially because of COVID. So we're doing the best that we can. But so I think it's, I don't remember what we said. It's about 0.2 of a point higher to get into math 0999 based on grade point average.
Are there any other questions for the group?
You know, I will try to find that communication and I will send about the grade point averages. I may paste several together so you can see the big picture, and I'll send it to Jonathan and have him send it out to you guys because it sounds like you guys didn't get to see it.
And again, we will be, the slide decks, not mine necessarily, but the slide deck Barbara shared will be available, as will the recording of this. And I know y'all want the recording of this because it will be something to share with all of your family, because I know at this point you've probably run through all of your streaming options, and this is going to be the best thing on Netflix. The information about, so just to sort of give a little bit of where we're coming. What's ahead next week? Again, I didn't want to confuse the messaging, but you'll be getting an email about this with an invitation. There'll be a Teams, I believe, although I'm really actually pretty excited about the fact that we managed to make this Skype work without breaking. So, I'm feeling like that's why I'm going to go out on a ledge and take the Teams jump. But we're going to look at building community online. Again, I know this is late in our transition, but I think actually the conversations we're having about this summer, and possibly if we have to go back into the fall, or we're building out brand new CoReq for online anyway, this idea of how we build community in an online course is a really useful one to have. For those of you who are on the Dana, Sonia did the Dana Center moving to online webinar, so it'll be that element of it writ larger. We are looking to have a May 7th CoReq workshop, looking on how to reflect on practice and build on success, sort of thinking about your data and also thinking about how you can do self-reflection. So moving into that sort of like, how do we learn from ourselves? There are plans to do a differentiated instruction in the sport classroom. And again, let us know your needs. I will be sending out a communication today. I inviting you to send me your resources. And I will find a place to put those, and also inviting you, if you're interested in looking at the MOOC, I'll collect a group of names, and then I'll connect us all with the folks in Wisconsin to see about getting us all access. So finally, I want to make sure we don't leave without seeing the brownie slide, because it's the brownie slide, and I'm still working for the momentum here. But with that, I really want to say thank you all. I really appreciate having you all together. It has been far too long. And I appreciate all the work you have done. I probably failed to say this at the start, but I'm going to say it right now, that I know how much work everyone has done to get students back into a normal track. And I just want to say that at the system office, that has not gone unnoticed. And we do appreciate all the hard work that has been done at campuses. So thank you so much. Yep. Again, look for an email from me. And Barbara, any final words?
Nope, just thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much. We appreciate this. And again, look for an email from me. This will be posted to the CCG website probably by tomorrow. So again, your streaming for the weekend is all set. Talk to you soon. Bye now.